Maybe wondering, should you grab Klee this time around? This is the second banner that we have the Lollipop Guild's third member, and today we're going to talk about whether or not she is the pick for you. Now the first thing to consider is that with her banner she has the 4 stars Fischl, Sucrose, and Barbara. Now these are also repeats of the 4-star options, and if you have these stacked out, this is going to be something to consider because to me, you're going to be getting a lot more of these units and utilizing them as your skill ups for them to be able to max them, and if these are characters you use versus the ones that you don't. If they're ones that you use and you do not have skilled up, I think that that is a reason why you should go for the banner, maybe not even for Klee, but for the characters within it. Now, if you do have them stacked, you are still going to get a lot of the, I can't remember the currency, but you're going to get the currency to be able to summon more or be able to use that for whatever character of flavor of the month that it is. I think right now it's Kaya. And so that's one thing to keep in mind with this. Some people may care about that more than others. I think free-to-play friendly people are going to not want to waste their summons on characters that they don't need. But I think that that's something that you should look at. The other part is thinking about what weapons you have, you know, like who do you have that's a Catalyst user currently? Like I currently have the Lost Prayer of the Sacred Winds, and when I originally did this, I didn't want Klee. I actually wanted to get the Wolf's Gravestone in the weapon banner, but when I did it, I ended up getting this, and I didn't even utilize any Catalyst users. So I ended up having to, I went for her just because I got the book that was in her banner, and it just worked out like 15 summons later. So it wasn't a ton more summons than what I had already done to get the book, and I was already kind of salty, and that kind of made up for it. So that was my reason back then. If you don't really have anything built, you know, taking a look at your selection, what I would say is that it depends on like how you, like what kind of character you're going to want. So for Klee specifically, to utilize her full kit, there are some things you need to know, and I think it's important to recognize that ahead of time and make sure you're prepared for it if you're going to get bombs. Now the first thing is her normal attack. This is actually going to be where you're going to put a lot of her talent resources, and the reason being is that her charged attack is where she does the most of her damage, and mainly that a lot of her skills are based off of. Dumpty Dumpty is the one where she throws out her little bombs and they do a lot of damage, they split off.
Explosions can hurt people. Boing, boing, boom.
You know this one. See, now the problem is you notice how far spread out that they are. Now unless you have characters or enemies that jump all over the map, you're going to have an issue with the DPS on this hitting for every single time unless you're utilizing an Animo character. And this can only just really bring them up. It's not going to move the bombs, as you can see.
Think you can get away?
Fatality.
One of the hardships of utilizing her is you really have to make sure that these are aimed correctly, otherwise you're going to have a hard time. Now you can technically aim Venti's ult in this case, or probably even Sucrose's ult, to bounce people in the air around where these bombs are, but it doesn't move the bombs. Which for Sparks and Splash is the burst ability that she has, where basically for 10 seconds she's going to have these little, basically little target sensor pyro lasers that just shit on people. And it's, I mean, it does good damage and it helps, especially like if you're utilizing cryo a bunch. Like I use Chi-Chi's skill, which lasts like 15 seconds, mixed with like if you're up close to them. This basically also causes knockback at the same time, but you can consistently keep repeating the melt effect on the enemies to make it do more damage. But it's not really high damage for each hit, it's more so by the end of it. So you need to be able to do the full 10 seconds to really get the 500% splash damage at just level 3 here. Now, this comes back pretty quick, and most of the time even before it's done for me. And that's just because of her energy recharge mechanic, which is actually her sparkling burst here. When she does a charged attack that deals a crit, all party members gain 2 elemental energy, which doesn't seem like a lot, but since you utilize charged attacks the majority with her, you can actually get this back pretty quick, especially when you're using a dual pyro in this team. So if you use her with Zhongling, who also sucks in energy recharge, then this really helps kind of balance them both out and help give them back more. And then when you switch to Zhongling, she also feeds Klee a little bit with the energy since you're going to get more. The other part too here is that with her other talent, and this kind of continues the charged attack piece, is that She has a 50% chance to obtain an explosive spark when you use her E or skill ability, the Jumpty Dumpty, or her normal attack. So not her charged attack. You have to use some normal attacks in between them to really benefit from this. So you'll see a lot of videos where people will just use a charge attack. They'll jump forward to avoid utilizing the stamina on her movement. So they'll do like this, jump. So that way I'm not using any stamina there. And then the problem though is you really have to do, you know, that, or you have to basically do a couple of these and then use this and then do the jump if you want to utilize that part of her kit. So it's kind of a choice that you're making at that point. The other annoying part is that it does create a knockback, which can be useful and kind of annoying at the same time, because you want all of your things to land, but it does help if you are trying to aim the enemies towards some of the Jumpty Dumpties on the ground. It's nice. It does reduce the amount of stamina that's consumed when she does that, which is also helpful. But that also brings up the other problem. So the issue with her kit to me is I have a hard time with units that cost stamina in order to use, because when you switch, if you have to make any kind of mobility, if you're, you know, doing any kind of tasks that require that, or you're trying to avoid some kind of reaction, or more importantly, you're in Spiral Abyss and you're trying to just avoid some of the more lethal attacks, she's also a very squishy character. And so if you don't have enough stamina to dodge, you're going to take that hit. You're not going to be able to dodge it unless you have a shield, or she has enough sustain from the heals that are happening to her. She can easily die. And that to me is one of her downfalls. And so you basically need to build that around her. So what I typically do is I actually have her mixed with Chi-Chi, because Chi-Chi is pretty much a little baby tank. She just gets pooped on all the time and just survives it. Switch through and do my rotation. So Chi-Chi usually fills up all of the gauges for their health bar, and then I move to Xiangling to basically put out her abilities, use Venti to create the iridescent Venerer and also collect all the enemies, and then you switch back to Klee and use her Jumpty Dumpties and start using her attacks or her burst ability, and then start going ham with some charged attacks. And for me, it works pretty well. But I still just do not like that necessarily, but because I have so much crowd control, it works really well. And when I need to, like if I'm running low on stamina, that's kind of where Chi-Chi comes into play so that I can rebuild my bar. But you kind of have to think through those things ahead of time, and it really depends on the characters you have. If you don't have Chi-Chi, I could also recommend that Diona works really well. She's just also kind of squishy, but she does create a shield and she heals, so that can benefit you if you build for both. And then Venti, if you don't have him, Sucrose is also a good option. And you can't make excuses for not having Xiangling. You should build her. She's good support. She works really well for most pyro comps. Bennett does too, but I still recommend building both. I hope this is helpful just in understanding her skill set, some of where her downfalls are. I would say that realistically, she's actually a unit that, as much as I hate to say it, if you skill her up in constellations, that's really where she shines. And that might be the same for some other characters, but for her to be a viable character, C0 is okay, but it's more noticeable when you utilize some of this. So attacks and skills have a certain chance to summon sparks that bombard opponents, dealing more damage. So basically just adding DPS to whatever it is you're already doing without having to do anything additional. Reducing the opponent's defense by 23% for 10 seconds anytime they're hit by the mines. So this could continue to go off throughout the duration of that. This is pretty huge on direct. This is just big. I mean, it just is what it is. Sparkly explosions, this is the big one for her. So if you use her burst ability, you don't have to keep her on the field for the entire 10 seconds anymore. You can leave and it deals 555% of the damage, which right now with where I have her just at level 3 in her talents for this right now is at 49% over 10 seconds. So that's basically 490% damage is what this is going to do over a 10-second period. So by me leaving, I'm actually doing more damage. Or if I wait till the last second, I could switch out and it would be able to stack that damage and almost double it, or more than double it. So this one's huge. Huge for her. And then of course the last one, this is just an additional regeneration. So her constellations actually do have a lot of usability, whereas for some characters, it's just not necessary. But for her, it really changes her entire character dynamic and how useful she can become for your team, because not only could she become a battery, she can become a DPS character. You could easily just use her ability and swap out just to get the bare minimum of it if you didn't want to keep her on the field, which basically puts her into a support role at that point, a support DPS. And then on top of that, you just have additional damage and a defense reduction. So you could use her alongside with one of your other units. For this, I think that if you're a whale, that's great. But if you're a free-to-play player, this doesn't help you. So I'd say that for me, for these reasons, I would have to say that if I could go back in time, I would actually skip this banner. I did get lucky with getting her summoned pretty low, like in like how many I actually had to do. She's actually the only lucky summon I think I've actually had in this game. But even still, she's actually the one that if there was a way to forgive the summon, I would do it if I could. Just because the usability, like I would rather have Diluc or I would rather have Hu Tao instead of her. Or even like Yanfei. Yanfei has been a great support since she came to the game, and I'm sure they were going to have more pyros down the road. But for me, I would have to say that depending on your character lineup and who you have, I just don't think she's a necessary addition to the lineup unless you're trying to build the Lollipop Guild, and this is the third one, right? You got Chi-Chi, you got Diona, she's your third. And you like her character design or you like the play style and you just really enjoy that part of the game, then by all means, that's worth it for you. And the other option is that you don't really have any pyro damage dealers and you just have Xiangling and you really want one. I think that that's a good reason. And you never know what's going to come up the pipeline or when characters are going to come back. You never have a guarantee on Diluc. You could just play random chance on those up until the point you get them, but that's really up to you to decide. But I hope this is at least helpful on whether or not you should go for her. If you do, just remember that you are going to need to build her around crit. You are going to need to solve for her squishiness, and you are going to be running out of stamina quite a bit, so having a backup plan for that, or just making sure that there's some security if you do take damage and you can't get away. So I hope that that's helpful in whether or not you should summon for Klee. I think she's a great character overall. I think all of the characters can be to their own degree. I just hope that this helps you guys for making the decision for yourself on whether or not you should go for her. And hope that this helped you. Like the video if you feel like it did. Subscribe if you want. If not, that's cool too. I'll see you guys next time.